Now you see, the second episode of Showtime's Kidding is the reason why I always like to give new series a break on the pilot, because you start to see a lot of changes beginning even with the second episode, which is what we saw here with Pusillanimous. I'm going to jump right into an episode that I really enjoyed. I don't feel like there was a lot per se that happened, but I think there was a nice pulling back and an examination of both Jeff as a person and the Mr. Pickles character. I want to say right from the very start that I like the way Jim Carrey is approaching the character even from the second episode. There seems to be a little bit more of a reality-based grounding of the character, but still not losing that Mr. Rogers aspect to it. But I think what we really got out of this episode was the contrast and I guess you could say irony and almost unintentional hypocrisy that's going on between the Jeff persona and the Mr. Pickles persona. And Jeff, as the Mr. Pickles persona, is really going up against Seb and butting heads about changes he wants to see. Between last week of talking about death, between this week with wanting to, change or keep gender fluid astronauter, which I just think is a very, very cool name, to how he was going to address the cutting of his hair. We see Pickles really wanting to move and bring the show forward into a modern time. But however, that's not something Jeff really wants to do in his personal life. Buying the house next door to Jill and where Will is at. Feeling like he can just come over when he wants. That he's that force that both of them need in their lives to give his stability back. It's interesting how they're trying to get something from the one life in the other life and the back and forth. And that's where they've been saying this idea that the two worlds can stay separate for long isn't going to last. And I think that ties nicely into Seb's attitude towards his son. From a business standpoint, from a producer standpoint, you understand where he's coming from. This idea of you got to keep the networks happy, you got to keep the advertisers happy. But I think you also have a father who is struggling. He makes a very important line about, that he and Jeff are strong men and they don't show it and they keep it inside. And I think that's a problem that Seb has. He loves his son, but he was taught and raised and thinks men should be a certain way. And Jeff is not that type of man. He is a touchy-feely, knowing, caring, loving, emotional type person. And I think you have a father who's trying to protect a son he doesn't really understand. And I think that makes it very tough. And I think that's why you see such the butting of the heads. And I'm not sure if those weren't bee stings on Seb's face, I would have thought those were hives breaking out from everything that's been going on. I also think Deidre's perspective, I think, is also very interesting in that she's going through something very similar that her brother's going through. With Deidre, it's how do you confront and deal with potential change in your personal life? How do you confront your husband and know and ask him if he's gay and tell him what it is that that their daughter Maddie saw? It's this interesting idea where at the end of the episode she chooses not to address it, or at least up to this point. And why? Because I think similar like Jeff, we live under this dream naivete that if we don't ask questions, if we don't really face the realities of things, we can just continue on living in this imaginary world. Ironically enough, we start to see the truths that come out of Mr. Pickles' world tends to be a lot more real than the truths we see coming out of Jeff and Deidre's lives. And Seb, unfortunately, has the tough situation of trying to maintain a show and trying to maintain a family, and also find some way for him to connect and feel with them also. Again, a very interesting dynamic. I thought it spelled a lot. I thought Jim Carrey did an excellent job in showing us a Pickles that is both, very nice and sweet and innocent, but in this episode, he can turn the screws a little bit, and I think that brings up my last point about Peter, who's a very, very, very interesting character. Jill's new boyfriend, and she says it's nothing serious, but we see through Jeff's eyes the way he's able to interact with Will, the way Will's able to go to him and speak and ask questions from a more realistic standpoint, and the fact that Peter may have a couple little quibbles here and there, but from a sexual standpoint, it seems like he works wonders for Jill. We see instances of him being a very good father, or at least big brother figure for Will. We even see the fact in the exchanges with Jeff, as much as Jeff is twisting the knife a little bit, that he sees Jeff as Mr. Pickles and this great admiration for the things he's done. So it's interesting that Peter doesn't fit in this narrative that I'm sure Jeff is looking for, which is, dirtbag boyfriend of my wife who should be back with me. So I'm curious to see how they play out. But most importantly, I really want to see how the whole leaking gas in the house next door is going to play out. I just think there are so many possibilities there. I got a little concerned when Peter was walking in front of it and saw the sink handle in the front yard that there was going to explode or something like that. And I would have just been like, Michel Gondry, I expect so much more from you than a bad cliche from that. But we didn't see that. But it's kind of like the metaphorical and possibly in a weird way ticking time bomb ticking in the background. So curious to see if we get some insight to it in the third episode. But so far, 2 episodes in, I love the fact the second episode concentrated more on the humor and less on just the emotional heart punches. But Jim Carrey, excellent performance, and I'm looking forward to see how this continues moving forward.